Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. I'm absolutely thrilled to share that this week's episode is sponsored by Virta, a leader in smart, flexible EV charging across the UK and Europe. Virta is all about intelligent infrastructure and future-focused thinking, making EV charging work for businesses, cities and people alike. I'm joined by Suki Sangha for a brilliant conversation about how EV charging is evolving and why it's time to see it as part of the wider energy and digital ecosystem, not just a plug in the ground. This is the kind of conversation that shows what's possible when the whole ecosystem works together. So on today's episode, I have with me a lovely guy I have been speaking to for absolutely months, I have to say. It's Suki Sangha from Virta Global. Suki, thank you ever so much for joining me. I can't believe how long we've been talking and trying to get you on here. So my apologies for the length of time, but thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Liz, and thanks for inviting me on. And yes, we've been trying to set this up, I think, for sort of 3 or 4 months now. I think we've probably discussed charging infrastructure to an extent we could have done 5 or 6 or 7 of these podcasts by now, just in the conversations we've had. But thanks for having me.
Hey, no worries. And actually, just to warn you all, me and Suki can talk for England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, because we just, like you say, we could probably do various iterations of this. So let's just go. So you are the sales lead for UK and Ireland for Virta Global. I always talk to people about this to start off with. Talk to me a little bit about what your background was, because it's not always been in this kind of sector, has it? Quite a while ago it was something else, and which I personally feel from talking to you for so long that's kind of built the way you think about consumers and customers.
Yeah, I think good question, Liz, and I think you've probably understood a little bit more of who I am and why I sometimes talk the way I talk and value the things that I do. I'll start with right back at the beginning. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So mum and dad had numerous businesses, nightclubs, restaurants. So grew up in the hospitality sector from a very young age. So I was surrounded by, as you do in those sort of families, surrounded by business chat around what the customer needs, what the customer wants, what we should be doing next, to make sure we stay relevant and have the right sort of offerings for our customers. So from a young age, you're exposed to an environment where there is constant chat around the customer. Grew up, started sort of helping my dad in and out the businesses sort of from 13, 14, sort of going in with him to help him set some tables up before he opened and make sure the place was as it should be, through to sort of by 15, 16, 17, working my weekends in the trade, going from back of house through to front of house. And so by the time I sort of left school and finished my education and went out into corporate life, I didn't actually want to work every weekend as many young men at 18, 19, 20 do. So I thought, I want a corporate career, I want something different, but I think you take a lot of that learning and values with you. So that took me through into my corporate career, started in mobile telecoms, right back at the stage, and we call it all disruptive now, but right back at the stage, the network switched from analog to digital, with all of the kind of options that opened up in terms of growth and service delivery and just the type of services that could be delivered. From there, I went into fleet telematics. I spent time in disruptive business travel solutions, sort of changing the business travel industry from one where you had sort of business brokers providing your travel services, business travel agents, to a fully digitalized service. And I've basically worked in and around, as I say, whatever we deem as disruptive tech now in some way, shape or form, but changing old habits, old processes within businesses, digitalizing them, bringing them up to date to make sure that they can deliver their services in a better fashion, or reduce overhead or reduce resource, or open up new revenue streams. So that sort of took me to about 3.5 years ago, where Virta reached out to me. I was in the fleet space, working with a fleet hire company, their large fleet hire corporate, on the digitalization of a rental solution. And Virta reached out to me and said, look, we actually think you've done just about every aspect of what's included in ChargePoint service delivery from a software standpoint. So we'd like to have a conversation with you. So I joined Virta 3.5 years ago, have been here ever since, having these sorts of conversations, helping our partners and our clients solve their sort of charging challenges and making sure that they've optimized their networks and built networks and optimized them to meet the requirements of the modern day EV driver.
With a very customer focused lens as well, haven't you? And the one thing I didn't do when I first introduced you was to say that Graham Rowlands from Devitech, who I previously interviewed, introduced us, and he also is very customer focused, and that's kind of what, through our conversations, and I think probably other people picking up today will get from you, that's what kind of, that's how we became, we kind of started chatting away, didn't we, about stuff. But Graham, again, he's that kind of guy. You too, I totally get why you enjoy working, working he's one of your customers anyway, isn't he? But actually, I totally get why he introduced you, because
Graham,
you are two peas in a pod.
He's a customer, he's a great friend, and likewise, as you and I have done, Liz, Graham and I can talk for hours just on what's right, what's wrong, what we need to do next, how we improve the services that we offer, because Graham also comes from a background where he's used to delivering work to a standard, and I think same applies for us. But also, you've got to remember, and I think you and I have spoke about this a few times, we have a job to do for our companies. We drive our businesses. We make sure that we're continuously raising standards and evolving our solutions and our offerings and services. But we wear another hat. We're EV drivers as well. And this, going back to what I just said a little while ago about my background, you can't it's very difficult to cook great food and serve it if you're not willing to taste it and if you're not going to eat it. Right the way through everything I've ever done, you've got to be a consumer first of all yourself to understand the challenges and get into the mindset of the consumer, the end user of the service that you're providing. And that's where we always start our conversation, by understanding the end driver, whether that be you or I on our weekend travels with family, whether it be the fleet driver, whether it be whoever that person in that vehicle is, what are their challenges and what are their organization's challenges. Then once we've got a handle on that, we sort of figure out how we build the right tools and services and products to let our ChargePoint operating partners supply and service those challenges. So it's, I quite often say what we do is a B2B2C play with the consumer at the very end of it, but the start point is the C, it's the consumer. Then we work back from that and say, right, how do we make sure they have a great experience with us and through our partners.
And everybody who's been listening to this podcast for a while will know that I totally sing from that hymn sheet, being an advocate and working in the sector as well. It's so important. So really what you're saying is, as Virta Global, you get into the nuts and bolts of everything. But I think, and you described Virta to me previously as similar to Intel Inside, in that people don't realise the full extent of what you do. So can you just, to give people context, can you explain on that analogy and sort of give me a little bit of background to, I know you've just kind of given us a flavour, but what exactly does Virta do? Because we need to start off by saying how many charge points you've got, because that just blew my mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Liz. Good question. Intel Inside, I think that's how I say it. We all have our own sort of ways of making that statement. Virta started life 11 years ago global head offices in Helsinki. So we came out of Helsinki. We're a CPMS first company, so we build the software solutions needed to deliver EV charging. We both in terms of charge points management system and the wider ecosystem. So plugging in everything from the payments and transactions sort of processing modules through to the communications modules, through to the apps and UIs that drivers need to access services at the front end, and right the way through to the support services that our partners need to deliver to their drivers, such as the sort of 24/7, 365 driver call center. We're now trading in 36 countries, so we have operations in 36 countries. We're just like Intel. It's that name, it's on the laptop, but you don't quite know. You never really speak to them directly, but you know it's important and you know it's there. So we are trading in 36 countries, or have charge point operations in 36 countries. We are delivering a charging session, give or take, about every second and a half across our network. So that's an awful lot of data that lets us understand what works, what doesn't work, where is charging simple, where is it easy, what is working today, and what are the challenges, and what do we need to build into next to make sure we deliver great charging experiences.
And go and tell them how many chargers you've actually got globally.
125,000, just over 125,000, with access into another kind of maybe just shy of 600,000 through our roaming partnerships, but 125,000 plus directly supported chargers on our platform. So we know what good looks like.
And that's a good thing, because there's a lot of people that don't. And I did have I had a whole episode on kind of best practice, kind of what good looks like, with Gary Comerford from EV Musings. But we've talked about things in a bit of a different way previously, and I'd like to kind of bring some of that into this, because there are so many things that me and you have talked about over the months we've been chatting that have just been, we totally think the same way. I want to start first by kind of saying, what you've just said, kind of the 125,000 charges and knowing what good looks like. There's so many different aspects of what you're doing, and how do you pull this all together? How can you do this to make sure that like you said, that person at the end, the person plugging that EV in, has a seamless experience? What is it? What is your USP?
I think when we strip everything back, Liz, it's probably the number of service and the types of services that we offer. But if I say, what is it that really makes this work? What makes us unique, and what lets us build out the way we have done? And I should have added in that last question, we are, the Financial Times 1000 list have had us down as the fastest growing EV charging platform in Europe for the last 5 years running. I think there's only 15% of the companies in their list make that list for 5 years on the trot. So we're doing something right. But what is it that we're doing right? I could answer that in a number of different ways, but if I'm being perfectly honest, when you strip it back, Liz, we're a software first business, software and integrated energy services. So we hold this unique position, a bit like a broker does. The broker supplies a service out to the customer at the front end, but also understands what the retailers or providers of the service at the other end need as well. We're wired up a little bit differently. We actually provide the service to our CPOs and charge point operators. We've got 1,000 of them that work with us globally. But the fact that we're delivering the EMP side of the play, we're delivering the apps and the functionality and handling the payments and the transactions and delivering the EV driver support lines. On one side, we have the driver, and on the other side, we have the operator. And we're delivering a service and the tools to both to get what they need from a charging service. So I think the insights, it puts us in a unique position. We have these insights from both sides that there is advice sort of come from a trusted advisor position with our charge point operators to really help them understand what they need to be doing, where the quick wins are, what's the low hanging fruit, but also mid to long term, where should your focus be, what should you think on developing, how do you deliver great charging infrastructure, how to make sure that you're addressing the driver challenges, things like receipting, which was a personal sort of favorite of mine. The number of apps and service providers out there that just couldn't deliver an in-app receipt. So it meant for me that when I used other charging networks, I spent an hour and a half to 2 hours on a Friday morning every single week phoning up providers for chargers that I've been to that week to say, hello, my name's X, I've been at your charger on this day in this date, here's the last 4 digits of my credit card number, can you please send me a receipt? But going through sort of helplines and wait times and doing that for over the number of chargers I've been to in a week was time consuming, but we've delivered that service in app since prior to me joining the business. So any Virta driver, whether it's through a co-branded charge point operators app or whether it's through our own app, will get in-app receipting there and then. So it's understanding the challenges that the driver has, not just an obvious in accessing the charge point, but how does charging work for them? What else do they need to see? When you find a charger, should you really be moving to a different mapping service to try and type in or find out the location it's at, get the postcode, type that into your Google or whatever car maps are in Dash for you to try and figure out how to get there? Or do you very simply locate a charger on a network and then say to your phone, map me to it and send that information to the car, which we can do. So it's taking those challenges, Liz, and I think being able to communicate what those challenges are, and then, as I say, provide the services and the tooling that our charge point operators require to make sure that they can react to those challenges and deliver a robust and reliable charging service.
So to me, summarising what you've just said, you have a holistic and consultative approach, but you also provide it in kind of an innovative way as well. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. I think there's one piece that we don't do, Liz, and we've got a lot of UK partners for that. We don't deliver. We can do everything else, but we don't do the infrastructure delivery. So we don't do the site enablement. We don't do the installations. But we've got a great network, and so do our charge point operators, installers. We've got a great network of partners that can do that piece, but we sort of pride ourselves in saying we provide the technology stack. And by the way, that's also the hardware as well. It's not just the software and the CPMS and the digital service provision or the insights or the user apps. It's also the hardware. And you know yourself the number of issues out there and integrations between backends and hardware providers. We say, look, we take that pain away for you. We provide fully integrated hardware. Essentially, another way to put it is it's plug and play hardware when it arrives on site. So it arrives pre-connected to our network, pre-connected on your back end, full visibility of the charger. As soon as you energize that charger, it's live and your service can start from there on in. So it's understanding the breakpoints in delivering infrastructure like this and saying, well, we will create the services and the solutions to bridge those breakpoints and relieve those pressure points that are often failure points for our clients as well.
I was going to say, you are taking the pain away from people, aren't you, by doing the majority of the donkey work, really, as it were, and having it all kind of there in I was going to say in a tin, but it's not in a tin. But you know what I mean. It's there specifically for.
It is that.
For that organisation, that CPO, so that makes a massive difference. You've talked, like I say, you've said the number of chargers and that you've got and the number of countries that you've got, and I know I've seen some kind of CPOs that are European based actually kind of doing a bit of a lift and shift, chucking it from wherever they were in Europe into the UK, and we are a little bit quirky over here, aren't we? You know, we've got a few quirks, but I was gonna ask you sort of when we're talking about things coming over to the UK from Europe, and then we're looking at scaling up operations and things. How have you been able to overcome those hurdles that maybe some of the other companies kind of bringing it over and going, oh, that didn't work, did it? How have you
Yeah,
done
yeah.
that?
I think we've probably been fortunate in that we're coming out of Scandinavia and the Nordics. We're a very large network in Finland. We're a very large operator. So our experiences in that market and what's happening in Finland and what's happening in Sweden, our experiences in the German market, it's the Nordics especially is one of the most advanced charging markets in the world. So lifting, shifting experiences from markets that have already done it has really been great, and it's really helped. That said, we're now getting to a stage where I think the requirements are much more nuanced. We've been very generic in what you and I have talked about in terms of so far, in terms of our drivers' challenges, but we're now getting to those sort of, there's another layer that's being added into the mix and into the complexity, and that's the operator of the fleet quite often. What is it what is it the fleet itself or the fleet operator needs and wants? And therefore that complexity means that we're having to sort of be much more nuanced in certain segments and sectors. What is it we do with sites where there's not enough power and upgrading power is expensive? What do we do there? Do we just walk away after saying, look, you've reached your max limit, sorry, you can't have any more charge points? What do we do when it comes to airport infrastructure? And you'll see a lot on our website around what we've done to solve those sort of challenges around airports, where procuring extra power is expensive. They're sites far out from sort of quite located quite far away from grid infrastructure. So how do we sort of handle that? What clever energy management tool can we use to make sure that we can continuously evolve and adapt our charge point operator services to cope in constrained environments? And that can mean things like an airport infrastructure where we understand how long the drivers are parked there for, and we make sure that we use very clever algorithms and systems that create virtual queues. The drivers won't often see that, but we'll create virtual queuing and scheduling to make sure that the vehicle's still fully charged or at the state of charge that you need when you leave that airport. But behind the scenes, we're doing everything to maximize and utilize all of the available power in the right way to make sure everyone comes out getting what they've asked for, but not realizing just how clever we've had to be in the background to make sure that's delivered in a constrained environment.
But that's really good, because that really, as a driver, that's what you want, isn't it? And we've talked about, kind of different things, which I think we'll kind of go into in a few minutes, but you literally just want to have a seamless service, because, if you don't have that, then if I go to a charger and I have a real, plethora of problems, I'm less likely to actually go back. I might try one more time on the same network, and if I have a similar thing, I'm going to say, nah, I'll cross that off my list and then go on, this is my naughty list, this is my good list. So those are the things. And we've kind of, me and you've talked about this before, that there's been a lot of examples in the last 2 years that I've been driving an EV even, where the charging infrastructure isn't very well, it's not maintained very well, so where you've got chargers bagged off, or you try and charge, you'll try and initiate a charge and it's just failing all the time. How do you think we can actually prevent this? I mean, you're talking about the way that you're working is quite intelligent, but there's a lot of CPOs aren't out there that are actually having these struggles, aren't they? So what are your thoughts?
I think there's a lot coming down the line, as Liz, in that respect. Sort of future iterations of, or even current iterations of OCPP will give us sort of the additional insights and more at a granular level in terms of what's happening at chargers, but not just at chargers, within the componentry, within chargers as well. But I think there needs to be a more holistic approach. Operators again need to understand that it is a driver first service. This isn't, it's not a case of, hey, I'll get to it when it goes down. We have to be more proactive. They have to be more proactive to understand, are the maintenance schedules up to speed? Are we checking these sites? Are we checking the chargers? Right down to sometimes, I mean, I've accessed sites where, you kind of think, when's the last time the site was cleaned up and tidied up, let alone someone's inspected the chargers. But from the maintenance aspect, it's really important, but also understanding the hardware you're working with, spare parts availability and stock availability, the ability to run remote diagnostics and figure out what is happening when there is an issue, and even we've discussed it before, but looking at certain aspects of self-healing, and we sort of launched this maybe about 2.5 months ago, a part of something that will build up to be a portfolio of self-healing options and tools. But we can set parameters on our back end today that says, look, if there is a fault error, or there's an error code, and it is this or this, and it's within these parameters, we just want the charger to automatically reboot itself. Now, I know we're talking high tech now.
No, but that's, oh my God, if it could happen, if, like we also said problems with laptops. Wouldn't it be great if a laptop kind of went, although, I mean, I did actually have one of those fatal errors. I had a fatal error kind of coming up, whoop, whoop, on my screen last week. And I was like, oh my God, I've not had that for a while. I'm not saying fatal. I don't like the word fatal anyway, but something where it is intelligent enough to kind of go, ooh, these things aren't working. I think I better switch myself off and switch myself back on again.
And there it is. We're finding it's where we deploy those services, it's increasing uptime by 30%. So that shows you that actually in 30% of the time, it's just a simple reboot that's required. There's a number of different things that could be sorted by a reboot, but we still see it. We might not know why, but the number of times a reboot solves your laptop or your mobile phone, it just, it's something I don't turn on and off regularly enough, but every once in a while, phone just starts the apps are getting a bit clunky, things are starting to freeze, the screen's not responsive. You switch it on and off, and guess what? Everything is fine after that. So to say that actually 30% of the issues that are experienced can be resolved with a simple reboot, to recognize that, and many do, but to then say, well, actually, why don't we then build something that lets you actually do just that? Charging networks, sadly, are not at the stage yet where they're manned 24/7. It's not like the service stations where quite often there was someone in a kiosk or in the service station behind a counter or at a window that you can go and speak to that would maybe start that pump for you if you had a problem at it. So you've got to automate as much of this as possible. So looking at it that way, and really, again, driver first solutions, but aimed at the charging operator to say, look, we understand what your driver's issues are and your issues are, and we're building the services in the background to automate as much of this as possible for you. Again, reducing downtime, increasing uptime, reducing the need for resource. These are all important factors in the CPO space.
Do you know, it's funny, I was just thinking, you just tweaked my memory. When I was still living in Halifax, I worked in kind of for a parking technology company, and I was that person sending out engineers on breakdowns and kind of taking service calls, and we did the whole lot. And I looked after the southeast, and I remember then, and this is, I mean, my God, we're talking like back in the late 1980s. She says, covering her mic up. And we were kind of, the late 1980s. And I remember taking those calls from the customers down south, and literally saying, right, okay, from what you're saying, you're going to need a system reboot. This is something, that back then I was advocating for them, because I knew a lot of them would end up paying for a call out anyway. Mm-hmm. So I was actually trying to help them sort it out themselves. And it's a bit like the EV charging. If it can do it itself, I mean, God, we're talking a long time ago, aren't we? Really, from when I was doing this originally. But the problems still exist. Different systems, the problems still exist. And if you now have got that ability to be able to like you said, I like the words healing. It's actually the system's healing itself. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, as I say, for 30% of those issues that actually the healing portion of it would have been a simple reboot, it solved that. So 30% of the pie sorted. We have that covered, and then now we move on to addressing how the other sort of 70% of the issues can be, or how we can build the tooling to help our charge point operators resolve those at the front end as well. But it's thinking that way, and it's taking that view, Liz, and I always love working with partners and clients that, back to your part about Graham, that are that way driven as well. The customer experience is important to them, so you're aligned at the very outset on who's important, and usually it's not them or us, it's the customer, it's the driver.
And you were talking, we were talking before. You were saying before about what good, what good looks like. And me and you had this chat before we started recording, didn't we? And we've got different ways of we kind of both drive EVs. We both have different things that we do since we've been driving an EV, haven't we? And I suppose if we look at kind of loyalty and what people's preferences are, that's really important. Do you know what? Let's just discuss what we were talking about earlier. You were saying that you drive a Tesla, and but you use multiple charge points. You don't stick with the supercharger network. Yay! And everybody, if you drive a Tesla, please don't just use the supercharger network, because that's like the creme de la creme. You've got to see how everything else works. Anyway, we talked about the fact that you said that when you used to drive on motorways and you were using wet fuel, you wouldn't go to a petrol station at a motorway services. And I agree, I wouldn't. Yeah. But yeah. We would fill our car up, our Golf, we'd fill it up. And we had like 500 miles anyway to a tank, so a bit different. But we'd charge it. Sorry, I've gone to EV now. But we would fill our car up, and it wouldn't be at the motorway service because we knew it was more expensive, didn't we? You agree with me. But now, do you want to explain about what you do, and I'll just explain what we've started doing as well, because it's different, isn't it? It's interesting. It's interesting how we're both doing different things.
But this is the understanding and knowing the customer piece. Yeah. You and I have a slightly different requirement when it comes to charging. When it was wet fuel, we had a similar requirement, exactly the same thing. I've been an EV driver for now nearly sort of three and a half years. Prior to that, sort of 30 years driving petrol, or slightly more driving petrol and diesel cars. I hadn't been to a service station to fill up with petrol or diesel in probably over 15 years. Now that I'm an EV driver, I have a list of sort of priorities in terms of charging that I consider when I decide where I want to stop. I'm usually out more often than not during my working hours, so it's business travel predominantly, when I'm away from home, or when I need en route charging, Liz. So when I stop, I think of the amount of time I need to stop for, the services and amenities that are available to me, the price that I'm paying, the accessibility of that site. So quite often I've become a creature of habit. I'll use the same charging stops, because I know that, okay, by the time I pull up, plug in, walk over to the services, I'm not getting any younger, so there's normally a comfort break in there somewhere. I need a cup of
love.
Exactly. And then of course you sort of double up or double down on that by saying I'm going to have a coffee now as well. So it's a comfort break, it's a coffee stop. By the time I get back to the car, 25 minutes, I've got what I need. If there's another 5 minutes left, it's a quick scan of the phone, check and maybe respond to a couple of emails, unplug, and you get moving again. But it's, for me, it's maximizing that stop. How do I do more than one thing? How do I tick multiple requirements within that time frame that I've allowed myself to top up and do whatever else I need to do? So services tend to work quite well for me there. And I think if you describe what your sort of priorities and amenities are, excuse me, if you describe what your priorities and amenities are, and then let's look at where we differ, Liz.
Yeah, so your range on your Tesla is going to be a lot. Well, it'll be a lot higher than we've got, on our high-end Ionic, and I would say that we have kind of. Because I've kind of said, I've said to other people that I personally feel that we've got an opportunity to make to change our own behaviours, and because because my background's continuous improvement, that's kind of what I'm trying to do, I suppose. But within the requirements of, you said listed your requirements. So, and my requirements to my husband's requirements are slightly different with regards to kind of what we want for charging. So yeah, amenities is really, really important. Like I say, I've talked to Gary Comerford about this. Amenities is really important because it's funny, when you were saying earlier, I was thinking, it's never mind range anxiety, it's bladder range anxiety, really, isn't it? There's no car EV range anxiety, it's just your bladder range. But so it's kind of the comfort break, it's the amenities, but I also want to make sure that there's going to be a charger there when we get there, and sometimes, and it's not that we won't use services, but I suppose lately we've been going down to Exeter and back quite a lot to pick our son up from uni and bring him back and stuff like that. And we're not going down the M4, M5 because most of the time we've been going, there's been a crash. So we've gone through A303 down towards Stonehenge and that way. So en route, there's more pubs and garden centres and things like that. And I suppose we started kind of getting a bit more used to that because of the fact that, I suppose when we first started driving the EV, because we had to charge more regularly, we'd sort of, we hit a couple of snags at service stations because, especially kind of, around Christmas time and sort of, if we go away, we're more, or when James was at school, it's different now because we can do it whenever we want, yay! But we would hit those holiday periods. So you'd go to a service station, and actually it'd be chocker, or I remember I said to you, didn't I, before we started recording? I remember going up. We'd not had the car very long, and me and James went up to Durham Uni, and most of the most of the charging stops were okay. There was a couple where it was a little bit. I got really used to going round to talking to other EV drivers, going, "Hello, how long do you think you might be?" And just just having that nice conversation, and it's a bit of an excuse for you to have a chat to somebody. And as we've just said, I'm good at talking, or else I won't be doing this. So our requirements are different to yours. If I'm working and I'm having to travel quite a lot, I can understand why you do what you do because you're working around your journey and your mileage and what you actually want from things. And I said to you as well, didn't I, before we started recording, my husband's requirements are kind of, yes, it's kind of amenities, but his price is higher up. Whereas I would be, yes, I want amenities, but to be honest, I just want reliability. I want reliability and I want ease of use as well as those amenities.
Yeah.
I would rather pay a little bit more than have to have a crappy service.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of, like you say, it's about who that person is, isn't it?
That still applies to me as well. Not all my driving is motorway driving. There's an amount of it is, and for motorway driving, I tend to use services. I tend not to veer off the motorways, but when I'm not on the motorways, it's very similar to yourself. But again, then I'm looking for charging stops that are usually not just charging oases. They're a bit more than that. I'm looking for a charging stop that can provide, as I say, somewhere for me to sit and have a meeting, get online access my emails,
Yeah.
get something to eat or drink,
Yeah.
all of that while I'm charging. So hotels are a particular favourite of mine, for example, Liz. But I often think to myself, okay, well, what is it when I am travelling on a motorway? What would it take someone to get me to veer one or two, to veer off at a junction, come off at a junction and head off a
Go
mile
on. What
or
would it?
two?
What would it? What
For,
would
for,
that
for,
be?
for, for me personally, it would be price. It would be
Right.
the understanding. It would be, it's that dynamism that sort of that we want in pricing. And when you look at charging networks, they sometimes get a little bit much of a muchness, much of a likeness, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
but actually, loyalty pricing is actually really important to a lot of our clients, and we deliver some very clever tooling for them on that, in that basis. But actually, it's more than just saying, well, hey, we have either a single rate no matter when you come day or night, or we have a peak and an off-peak rate. It's the ability to say, well, I'll maybe give you 4 different rates during the day, depending on utilization at my charge points. At peak times and at peak utilization, yes, you'll probably pay our highest rate, but actually at off-peak times of very low utilization, you will pay our lowest rate. And then sort of taking that one step further and saying, well, we will go beyond that. And in situations where hotels, large retailers, coffee shops, and such like, we can we have the services and platform services to say, well, who are your loyalty customers and how do you recognize them? And do you doff the cap to them a little bit more in terms of EV charging and say, on top of these general public rates, you are a loyal customer, Liz. You are someone that has membership at my global or national hotel app, or we recognize who you are, we value your business, and actually, if you want to use this service from us, we're going to do something a little bit more for you. We're going to give you a better rate than we offer the public. So it's the ability to take that, which and understand loyalty and understand you and I and say, well, on top of that, we still want those other things. We want the amenities.
yes.
We want to make sure we get the Wi-Fi. We want something nice to eat. But it's understanding the driver in that holistic sense. What is it you want? And it's not just, we've moved away from the driver saying, I just need a charger. No, I need a charger, access to a parking bay, and I need to know the power's going to be there. That's foundational stuff now. That's the bare minimum. Drivers are much more complex than that. What is it you want on top of that? So it's understanding that, and then having the mechanisms and levers to say, well, I can pull the right levers for the right drivers, ultimately to make sure that I capture more of their business and I grow my network and make sure that I'm delivering the service that they want. So it's at that sort of baseline level, making sure that again our charge point operating partners have that sort of tooling to say, we've got a lot of levers that we can pull here. So yeah, site A doing great, sort of 5 days a week. What can we do for that one over the weekend? Site B actually doing really well at the weekend, but seems to have a little bit quiet in the mornings and late evenings. Can we use pricing to entice those drivers that are
Yes.
that are
Yeah.
passing us on the motorway a mile away every evening and don't want to come off? Well, what is that going to be? Is it 5 pence a kilowatt? Is it what is it we need to do? But there is always a number. There is always something in terms of services. So raise the standard.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think is sort of fundamental in this. Raise the standard and make sure you have all the levers that you need to be able to make yourself attractive to the driver, and make sure you understand
And
your
listen.
driver as well.
Yeah,
Listen.
listen. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Listen to the drivers. What do the drivers actually want? Like you say, what you want, setting up at 5:30 or whatever in the morning on your chart, on your journey, compared to me kind of going down to Exeter on a Friday or whenever we go down. We're just different. You'll stay with your service stations. I will go to
Mm-hmm.
a garden centre or a pub or somewhere like that, dependent on what our needs are. And also me and James are both celiac, so, and Richard's dairy intolerant, so we can't always just jump and get food, so a lot of the time we take stuff with us, so but we still want to go for a comfort break and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
this is really important, to be listening, isn't it? It's using those ears and kind of checking out what people actually want.
I think there's a great future ahead of us, and I think we all get caught up in the journey that we've been on the last sort of, whether it's 3.5 years in my situation, or those that have been sort of on that journey before me, sort of up to 11, 12, 13, 14 years even. But we're really only at the start of it. We've only scratched the surface in terms of, if you look at the EV transition, where are we in that
Yes.
long-term sort of goal? We're only just scratching the surfaces. So ultimately, it's about, I think the best way to do it is understand the customer and make sure you have the tools and levers you need, and the services you need to give that customer what they want.
I think that's perfect. That was probably going to be my last question, actually. Do you know? Is there something? Do you know what? No, let's just finish off with this then. In a perfect world, what would you as a driver, what would you like to happen over the next few years in order for these, we've talked a lot about this stuff, but in order for every journey that you have to be seamless, whether you use one of your partner networks with Virta, or whether you're out with your family on a weekend and you need to charge, what would you like your experience to look like?
I would love to see a time where charge point owners and operators recognised the value of the customer, and had the tooling required to be able to understand what I want, my list of amenities and priorities, and make offers to me that essentially drive my traffic or deliver
Yeah,
on what I want
yeah,
each and every time. Whether that's cost, whether someone is saying, you know what, we've got a promotion on just now, Suki. We know you're coming down the motorway at us. Actually, we're going to offer you this promotion because it's off peak time. We're quiet, and we'd like to see you visit us. Or enhanced service provision, more loyalty features in
yeah.
the apps, better pricing, offers Costa realizing when I'm, or Starbucks or whoever else, realizing, well, he does like a coffee and he passes here often. So actually he's here today, he's charging today. Let's send something to him and get it. So just that better connectivity between not just the charging service providers, but all of the ancillary services that exist or should exist around great charging provision, and all of it connected up to the end user, that driver, whether that's a fleet driver, whether it's a retail driver, whatever the case may be.
It's brilliant, honestly. It's been so lovely to finally get you on here, Suki. It's just the way that the way that you think and Verta think, and your kind of the push for customer experience really kind of, to me, it makes a difference. So I'll be sharing all of your web links and all of that kind of stuff on in the show notes when this goes live. So just to say, really, thank you, and it's finally been wonderful to get you on here.
Liz, it's been a pleasure. It really has been, and it has been, and we've waited long enough for this. So
We have.
we've still got a lot to talk about. Maybe we can get to part two at some point in the
Oh,
future as well. But
we'll
yeah,
definitely do that.
this has been fantastic. Thank you for having me.
No, it's my pleasure, honestly. So to everybody else, I'm just going to say, as I usually do, please like, subscribe, share all of the, kind of this episode. There'll be some shorts going out on YouTube, and they'll be going out on our social media platforms. We've got our Electric Evolution LinkedIn page now, so please follow us on there. And just to say thank you all for listening and watching. Thank you to Suki, and I'm going to say goodbye. See you next time. Bye. Thanks again for watching this episode of Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Virta, who are helping to drive smarter, more connected EV charging solutions across the UK and Europe. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe and explore our other conversations on sustainability, innovation and doing things differently. And if you know someone who would be a great guest, or maybe would be interested in sponsoring a future episode, you can reach me at liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks again for tuning in, because real change starts with the conversations we choose to have.